All right, everyone, thanks for joining. Congratulations and welcome to engineering. Glad to hear that all of you are thinking about Notre Dame engineering, and we hope to give you some information that helps you to make an informed decision going forward. So I'm going to start with a couple of introductions. So first of all, I'm Carrie Myers. I'm a faculty member in the College of Engineering. I'm an assistant dean. I'm also involved with Women in Engineering, First Year Engineering, and the Grand Challenge Scholars Program. So I'm delighted to be with you tonight, and I hope to be able to provide really useful information to all of you. But even more important than what I will share is the two student panelists that we have here tonight. So I'm going to let Claire introduce herself first.
Hi, everyone. My name's Claire. I'm a current senior chemical engineering major, and I'm originally from Kansas City. And for any of you who have some Notre Dame connections, I lived in Lewis Hall for 3 years, and I'm currently off campus.
All right, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, hey everyone. My name's Ken. I am a senior civil engineer. I'm from Hamilton, Ohio, which is about 40 minutes north of Cincinnati. So there's a big group of Cincinnati folks here at Notre Dame. And then I am in Duncan Hall and currently still living here, serving as an RA this year.
Okay, and for those of you that don't know, RA stands for resident assistant. So Ken, I think that means that maybe tuition is paid for this on-campus job that you have. Is that right?
Yeah, room and board is covered.
Okay, very nice, very nice. All right, so let's dive into engineering and why Notre Dame. So really the common theme that we see among the students that choose to come to Notre Dame is that there's guided by this mission of wanting to be a powerful force for good. And so I think you'll hear that as you hear from our panelists, the things that they're choosing to be involved with, wanting to do great things in the world, and they will. As an engineering student, it starts in the first year. We have a common first year of engineering, meaning that we want you to take the entire first year to discern, to determine which field of engineering is the right one for you. So you'll be taking some courses that will help you regardless of which field of study you go into. And I'm just going to mention briefly the two courses. One's a design course and one's a computing course. The design course, it's focused on learning the design process and using computers as tools to solve problems, using data to drive the decisions that you make and to solve engineering problems. So that's typically taken in the fall semester. And then we also have a computing course, which is basic programming skills. Sometimes we have students that come to us that have prior programming experience and sometimes not, and either way is just fine. But programming is required for all of the different engineering majors. And so we teach MATLAB and Python are the two programming platforms that we work on. And the biggest, and I think the most important thing we do in the first year is to help you to discern your engineering major and basically to better understand what the best pathway is for you. So it's really giving you an overview of the 5 engineering departments offered at Notre Dame. And you can see down here at the bottom, the different degree programs are listed. So it's a matter of doing some hands-on activities to better understand what those pathways might look like. Here's the part that is interesting. We have a very high retention. Like the students that come into engineering, about 85% of them will continue into their sophomore year, but 40 to 50% of them will switch from one engineering major to another. And we don't see that as a negative at all. We want you to get information and then feel really confident going into your sophomore year with what you're going to study. Just to mention briefly, there are a lot of opportunities for study abroad, even for engineering students. That is unique to Notre Dame. A lot of engineering students across the country typically don't have those types of international experiences. So I wanted to mention that we have both summer programs as well as school year programs. And then also we have some really unique engineering organizations. Some are service-based, some are professional societies. Robotic football is a fun, popular one that kind of combines engineering skills with athletics, which is something that started here at Notre Dame. And so with that, I'm just putting my email up here briefly, and I can put that up at the end in case anybody has any questions. We're gonna be start on time, end on time at 7:45. So I'm gonna stop sharing. And what we wanna do is shift really to question and answer. So please feel free to be putting things into the Q&A box, and I'll be moderating. And we want Ken and Claire to be answering as much as possible. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is really, can you describe how you selected your engineering major? You're both in different engineering majors. What was the pathway that you took? So Ken, do you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm a civil engineer. I did come into Notre Dame with the thought of being civil engineer, really kind of a loose basis, just on having a liking for construction and buildings and that sort of environment. But I did, during that first year discernment course, have several meetings with professors and really kind of explore the other opportunities, electrical engineering and computer science. And so I definitely explored, definitely looked around. And at the end of the day, I sided with civil just because of that love for construction. And that's actually what I'll be doing after graduation as well. So it worked out for me, but I have friends in all the majors, and there's definitely a lot of interesting stuff that they cover in their classes.
Yeah, so I'm a chemical engineering major. I came in thinking that I wanted to do engineering, and generally thought chemical engineering. I would say I prefer chemistry over like mechanics and physics and those sort of disciplines. And so after taking the first year course and taking, your physics 1, gen chem, those basic courses, I really preferred chemistry and enjoyed all of those basic engineering classes. So that's when I thought chemical engineering was the right fit for me. And then my very first chemical engineering class, called, I think, Introduction to Chemical Engineering, has been one of my favorite classes that I took here. I had a blast, and that kind of solidified my decision.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. So also had questions about internships. So could each of you talk about some professional experience that you've had and how that has worked out? So maybe Claire, you want to start this time?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of go through summer by summer what I had been doing. So summer after freshman year, I did an SSLP. That's a summer service learning program. So basically you go out into a community and volunteer with that community over the summer. So I did that after my freshman year. And then after my sophomore year, I was originally intending to study abroad, but that got canceled due to COVID. And so I had an internship at the Idea Center on campus. They work with helping develop startups out of new technologies that different professors are researching, and I've really enjoyed that. So after that summer internship, I still work at the Idea Center. So I've done that my junior and senior year. And then the summer after my junior year, I did an internship at PwC doing data and analytics. And then after graduation, I'll be returning to that same role I did last summer.
That's awesome, Claire. It led into permanent employment. Perfect. Ken?
Yeah, so to kind of run through my years as well, I'm glad you brought up the ISSLP, Claire, because that's a big opportunity for a lot of Notre Dame freshmen. And then also after first year, the engineering program has a summer abroad that is really popular for first year engineers to go on after their first 2 semesters on campus. I dabbled in looking into that. I ended up going back home for the summer after first year and worked for an asphalt maintenance company back home. And then sophomore year, I went to the career fair on campus, great resource for engineers, and was able to get an interview or 2 from that. And actually that led to an open position for the sophomore summer. Unfortunately, that was kind of shifted around and changed due to COVID as well. But then, it kind of led to future opportunities down the road, including after last summer, in which I worked for a construction management company, general contractor in the Cincinnati area that I'm returning to as well after graduation.
That's fantastic that these internships give you a preview of what you would get to do then in the future. So there's questions about study abroad and just general international experiences. So I don't know if you could each comment either whether from personal experience or it's a hard situation because COVID has provided so many disappointments for so many, any international experiences that you have to speak of or can refer to because of other students you've known. Ken, you want to start?
Yeah. I don't personally, unfortunately, have any international experiences. I think most of our class was kind of left out of that due to COVID. But I do know, a majority, as you mentioned earlier, Dr. Myers, of engineers have the chance to go abroad during the semester and during the summer, as I just mentioned. So it is something that a lot of people were signed up for, a lot of people were planning on, and still, this year and next, I know a lot of people who are planning to fit that into their curriculum.
Yeah, and I can talk a little bit about the study abroad program that I was intending to go on. So chemical engineering majors as a group have a study abroad opportunity in London, where you work in a carbon capture pilot plant, and you essentially complete your junior lab course abroad in London. And from what I've heard from, groups older than my grade, it's always a great, bonding experience, really getting to know your peers in your major a lot better. And then you also get to free up a little bit of time within your schedule on campus, which is definitely helpful since chemical engineering does have a pretty long course load.
Okay, great. Just to explain a little bit further, there are semester programs that students typically do during their junior year, and each engineering discipline offers those. And then additionally, open to anyone, typically after students' first year or sophomore year, there are 6-week summer study abroad programs where you go abroad with engineering faculty and get ahead on a couple of engineering courses. This is really popular, and overall, the rate of students that are involved with study abroad is about 65% of engineering students, which is huge when you compare that to other universities. So we're really proud of that, and we work hard to have as many international experiences as we can for our students. We have a question about AP credits. And this is a common question. We use AP credits for science and math for placement, right? So if you get a 5 on the AP test for calculus, A, B, or B, C, we would use that and you would get those credits so that you would be placed into the appropriate math level, or same thing for chemistry or for physics. But we don't take AP credits for other like liberal arts or other required courses. But this does ensure that it gets you into the right positions. I don't know, Ken or Claire, if you want to say anything about that. I personally, when I was a student, came in with no AP credit, so that's 100% fine. So don't feel like you're behind if you're in that situation.
Yeah, I would just second that. I came in with 1 additional math credit, so I started in the Calculus 2 course, but most engineers, I would say, probably start just with the regular track, and it's laid out so that you're more than capable of completing all your classes with no AP credit.
Yep, I don't think I have anything else to add. That pretty much sums up my experience as well.
Okay, so question comes in here that says, what is your course load like and how do you manage it? And that's a great question because engineering is a demanding curriculum. We would not want to sugarcoat that at all, but if you can get into Notre Dame, you can do engineering. So let me assure you of that right off the bat. But Claire, maybe you want to say something about what your course load has been like?
Yeah, so for me, I came in with Calc 1 and Calc 2. So I started in Calc 3, and those are the only classes that I kind of got out of when coming into Notre Dame. And I've had a pretty full, this year I've had 4 classes, both first and second semester, but every other semester I had 5 classes each semester. So it's a pretty full course load every semester. And one of the main ways that I have found myself to be productive, and what has really helped me is the friends that I've made in my engineering courses. A lot of times you'll get problem sets, homework problems that are very challenging, and you'll stare at it for a while and have no clue what to do. So instead of, beating your head against the wall, trying to figure out how to do this homework problem, having, a network that you can fall back on, shoot a friend a question, see if they know how to do it. And then also really be willing to reach out to professors and TAs. There are many classes I would not have made it through if I, wasn't talking to my professor weekly, going to office hours for help with homework, and really taking advantage of the resources that the professors and TAs offer, because they are always very helpful and will always give you a jump start on all of that coursework that you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd second everything Claire just said. I think all the professors here, every class I've taken has been very helpful, and the professors have been more than help, available to the students to help us with any questions, as well as the TAs and office hours that they host. So just reaching out to them, reaching out to your friends, and then just as you will with any university that you go to, adjusting to college and kind of figuring out how you work as a student. But you'll definitely be all right.
Yeah, it is a demanding curriculum. But again, you certainly can do it. If you were able to get into Notre Dame, I assure you can handle engineering. But it will be a challenging pathway. But that's why you would want to come here, I think. So a couple questions about particular majors and pathways. One about a pre-med track. And yes, certainly we have engineering students every year that finish an engineering program and go on to medical school afterwards. The most common pathway for doing that is through chemical engineering, although it's not the only way. For a pre-med track, there's some additional courses you have to take. And so we have an office for pre-professional studies that can help you navigate so that you pick all of your electives very intentionally to make sure that they would count towards what you want to do for your medical school applications. There's a couple biology classes. You have a particular psychology or sociology class that you would also need to include. And then there's a lot of service hours that you have to have as well. So we have an office, it's actually outside of engineering, that helps you to navigate that. So you can go through it from chemical engineering. That happens to be the easiest one only because you already have organic chemistry and some of the other science classes you would need to take. But we have students from all engineering disciplines that have gone on to medical school. So it's certainly a pathway available. We also had a question about biomedical engineering. And we don't have a strictly biomedical program, but we have students go that pathway, either through chemical engineering, if you want to look more at the cellular or molecular level. Certainly for mechanical engineering, if you were looking at something more like prosthetics or something like that. Also with electrical engineering, like working on how to move a prosthetic or certain devices that you might be working with. So there's a few different pathways, and really what we see is that students can get a minor in bioengineering if they're interested in that pathway, but then go about it with a different major. And then the last question was about material science, and certainly starting with material science is no problem. Most students would probably also start in chemical engineering if they were going that route, although other engineering disciplines also take material science courses. Certainly mechanical does. Ken, did you take a material science class?
I took a materials course for civil.
So there's one particular. So there's some exposure, I think, in most engineering disciplines, just so you get some exposure to materials. But again, sometimes we see students kind of focus on that with their elective courses or in their, subsequent studies if they decide to go on to graduate school. So that
and
good.
There's a new concentration for chemical engineers that's material science. So they do offer, a wide variety of electives that have to do with material science in the related field.
Good. So I got asked a question, your favorite engineering organization that you have been involved with, but we'll just broaden that. You could say maybe an engineering one and a non-engineering, something that you've been involved with that you've really enjoyed. Claire, do you want to start?
Yeah, so my favorite, engineering club on campus is Society of Women Engineers. I have served in a various number of roles with Society of Women Engineers, and I'm currently the outgoing president for the club. And it's been a great opportunity. I actually got that internship that has led me to my job after graduation through the group. I've met a bunch of really great friends. We have social events, professional events, talks, talks with professors, study groups, and anything in between. I found a really great community there, and it's been an unforgettable part of my Notre Dame experience.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of engineering, I have been really involved with the first year engineering course that Dr. Myers mentioned at the beginning. Right after my first year, I started serving as a student assistant for the course. and that has been the role I've been for the past 3 years. So I'm on my fifth semester now as a student assistant within the first year engineering course, and it's gotten me a chance to work closely with Dr. Myers, with the rest of the instructor staff, and then as well as meeting all the new engineers who come in and are excited about all of the different prospects and helping them through the discernment process, as well as learning those first basic engineering skills has been really, really exciting, and definitely an experience that I'm grateful for.
So we have questions about jobs and internships and those kinds of things. And the question was about, are internships paid? And I would say typically yes, and I'm going to let you guys answer as well about that.
Yeah, I would say pretty much, especially like with an engineering discipline, if you have an engineering internship, it would be very, very rare for it to be an unpaid internship. I think people would probably tell you not to take that internship if it was an unpaid internship for engineering. And pay can vary in industry and what kind of internship you're looking at. But I would say pretty much all internships that Notre Dame engineering students have over the summers are paid internships.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that.
There was another question about internship prevalence. I would say, and I'll see what you guys think about this, when we look at the data, your likelihood of getting an internship increases with your academic preparation level. So not as likely to have an internship after the first year, although we do have students every year that do end up with internships then. More likely after sophomore year, but virtually everybody can get one after their junior year, often with multiple offers. You guys both had multiple internships. Can you talk a little bit about the process you took in obtaining those internships? Ken, you want to start?
Yeah, absolutely. So the career fair here happens every fall. There's also a spring one, but the fall is there's one just for engineering companies of all disciplines. So I've utilized that each year and kind of gotten to talk with a few different companies, had a few internships or a few interviews come out of that, and then a few offers as well. Outside of that, I also knew I really wanted to stay in the Cincinnati area, close to family. And so I think there's some like individual work that I did to kind of reach out to different firms and companies around my area. But they're all, more than willing to, when they hear Notre Dame and Notre Dame engineer, they kind of often jump at that. And that has led to several other interviews as well.
Yeah, so for my internship experiences, my internship that I did with the Idea Center on campus, I actually found through the Chemical Engineering Weekly newsletter. So the Chemical Engineering Department sends out a newsletter every week that has internship opportunities, job opportunities, on-campus opportunities. That's really helpful and keeps you up to date with relevant job opportunities. And then my other internship I got after meeting with a recruiter through Society of Women Engineers. I'll also make one other plug for Society of Women Engineers. We take a trip to the national conference every year. And that moves locations. I think 2022, it's going to be in Houston. And that always has a really big career fair. That's always really exciting because you get to see, companies that don't typically come to Notre Dame are from different geographical regions. And I know a lot of people have gotten internships from that opportunity as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. So we do send a lot of students not only to the Society of Women Engineers Conference, but also there's other professional societies as well, and they all have career fairs. And so in addition to the on-campus recruiting, there's certainly opportunities. And I would say a plug for some of our alumni. I'm really proud of how our alumni stay in touch with us and how willing they are to talk to our students all the time and help with their connections in industry and in other places. There's a question here about job placement rate, and in engineering, it's incredibly high. So what we find in terms of permanent job placement, it's a really small percentage, like under 5% that don't have a job within a few months of graduation. Often we find is those few students that might still be holding out, they might have a very specific industry they want to work in or a very specific part of the country they want to work in. But by and large, almost everyone is placed at graduation. So yeah, good question about that. And I'm sure all of you would want to know that if you're investing this in your education, that there's going to be a great career opportunity on the other end. So understand that certainly. Question about your free time. So what do you guys like to do in your free time? Claire, do you want to start?
Yes. So I would say, the amount of free time I have kind of ebbs and flows with the schoolwork that I have. But on those, more calm weeks, I really like to read. I have a Kindle that I get books from the library on all the time. I'm also a big knitter. So when I have time, I'll knit scarves and one of my favorite things is knitting hats for my pets back at home. So that's kind of one of the silly little things that I do. And then also, love hanging out with my friends. I recently moved into this apartment just this year. So me and my roommate really enjoy having people over, hosting little dinner parties, things like that.
Yeah, I would say the same with my free time, ebbing and flowing. But when I have it, there's always stuff to do, I would say, around campus, and especially in the dorm life. As I mentioned earlier, I'm still living in the dorm this year. And so there's always people roaming the halls that you can kind of catch up with for a conversation. I've gotten dangerously good at spike ball and pickleball over the past couple of years, especially when COVID hit. Pickleball was like the only activity that was really on campus. So we did that almost every day, but that was a lot of fun. And just all the activities that's put on by basically every student group on campus. Each night, there's probably at least 3 or 4 things going on that you could find to do.
So another question about the liberal arts courses, like the writing courses and the other requirements. Maybe you guys want to talk about what you chose for your philosophy theology's core requirements. Ken, you want to start?
Yeah, so I started out in a what's called the university seminar, which each first year student will take one in a various discipline. Mine was in theology, and it was pretty just a general theology course. But then after that, you can really kind of tailor the philosophy and theology, even literature art classes that you want to take. I was looking into a wood sculpture class this year. Unfortunately, it didn't work out just with my scheduling time, but a lot of opportunities like that in ceramics. I was very excited for to kind of get my art credit taken care of, but also do something that you kind of learn a new fun skill out of.
Yeah, so I also, so like the first theology and first philosophy classes are all pretty similar. There's one main exception, I think, for the first years. It's a philosophy class called God and the Good Life, I believe. And that's one a lot of first years take advantage of. And then my second theology class I took was called Discipleship. And it kind of grew out of the SSLP that I had mentioned earlier, which was that like doing a summer of service in your community. And then my second philosophy class was environmental philosophy, which I found interesting. And I always liked spreading out my liberal arts classes because, with so much math and science that you're doing with your engineering degree, I always find it nice to, change up the work a little bit, write a paper, do a reading, things like that, instead of another problem set.
There's several questions in here about double majors and minors and concentrations. So I'll just mention that we do have like 5-year programs where you can get like a dual degree with arts and letters. That's one pathway that we see when someone is really passionate about something else. In addition to engineering, we have a 5-year MBA program where it's combined with engineering. It's a small number of students that get involved with that each year. More often than not, if you're interested in getting an MBA, work experience is really helpful. So often students will get, many of our graduates do get MBAs, but it's often after working for a couple of years, and a company will often pay for you to get that degree. Although that's certainly a possibility with this 5-year program. Ken or Claire, do either of you have a concentration or a minor that you wanted to draw attention to?
Yeah, I can mention I'm in the engineering business. It's called engineering corporate practice minor. So that's 5 additional courses throughout your curriculum, which is more than doable. And that's kind of just, as I mentioned, engineering and business combined. I'm taking a finance course right now, and I took an accounting class just to give, a better idea of the business side of operations, especially if you'll go into a management position within a company. And then within civil engineering, they have several concentrations. I am currently in the structural concentration, so a little bit more focused on that side of the curriculum.
And then I don't have a minor, but I have some of my friends in chemical engineering do have minors. I have a friend with a theology minor. That's probably the most different from the other classes that we take, but she's been able to fit that in pretty easily. So you can minors, I would say minors are a lot easier to fit in than doing a double major, which, as Carrie said, will probably take you 5 years to do a double major with engineering.
Yeah, it's certainly. And one thing I want, the students that are admitted to Notre Dame are all very accomplished. And so I know there's a drive to certainly think about like what are the opportunities and what's available, and certainly pursue that. But as a student graduating with an engineering degree, you will be very marketable without a concentration minor or double major. But if it's of your interest, then I think it's certainly worth pursuing. And I always tell students, you know, when you're in engineering, if you find a minor or you find something you're really passionate about, maybe it's 5 classes that are required, but maybe only 3 or 4 of them fit in your schedule. Take those 3 or 4 and then use that in interviews to kind of set yourself apart, to talk about like, I'm so interested in this topic that this is why I selected the classes I did. Although, because we do not have employers coming here saying, well, we'll take this engineering major, but only if they have this other minor. So I think if this is driven by your interest, then absolutely pursue it. So that was a good questions being asked about that. We had some questions about computer science as a major. So there's 5 departments within the College of Engineering. And so Ken is from the department with the longest name, which is Civil and Environmental Engineering and Earth Sciences. So there's 3 different degrees that you could potentially get from that department. So he's civil engineering. And then Claire is from Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering, although there's only 1 degree there, it's chemical engineering. Electrical engineering is another department. And then aerospace and mechanical engineering is combined into 1 department. And then the question was about computer science and computer engineering. That's also a different department. And you will see at some universities, computer science is in a college of science as opposed to being with engineering, where ours is combined together. Computer science actually in the last year has become the most popular major in the College of Engineering. It used to be aerospace and mechanical, and computer science and engineering has surpassed that just slightly in the past couple of years. And I think it's driven, this is a national trend that we're seeing because there's so much demand. But I will say that the national unemployment rate for engineers of any field is about 1%. So I think you should pick a major based on what you're really interested in. And computer science is a great pathway, just as a lot of our other pathways are. So we'll mention that. So we have a question here. What happens if you fail a course? What happens, Ken?
Well, first, it'll be okay. There's plenty of resources to kind of help you guide that scenario. But I think what would happen, fortunately, it hasn't happened for me in my experience. But I think what will happen is you would end up just working through to fit that course in again at a later point in your curriculum. But many of the classes, as some of them build on each other, you can take them concurrently, or there's maybe 3 out of the 4 or 5 classes that you take each semester that are kind of independent of the ones you've taken previous.
And I'll also say that I would say it's pretty rare for someone to get to the end of the semester and then realize they're failing the class and actually fail, get a F grade, because there is a mid-semester drop date where you can drop the class, not get credit for it. But that's what, with some of those really challenging classes or classes that when you're first getting into the university, I definitely know people who have dropped the class, mid-semester, picked it up next semester, and were able to succeed that second time around. So I'd say it's very rare for someone to make it all the way to the end of the semester without kind of understanding where their grades are at.
Yeah, that's a great point, Claire. We actually do have very few students that fail courses in a given semester. Often students will withdraw before they get to that point, but Ken is right. It will be okay. It is not the end of the world. And it does occasionally happen. And I don't know what you can do. You take the class again. So it's all okay. So question here is, what makes ND Engineering set apart from other universities? And so maybe the best way to answer this is to say, why did you pick Notre Dame? So maybe Claire, why did you pick Notre Dame above other programs that you were thinking about?
Yeah, so there were a couple of factors that really drew me to Notre Dame, as opposed to, some other bigger state schools or schools that might be, more focused on engineering. And first of which was the liberal arts education. I really enjoy having other classes outside of engineering, those basic chemistry and physics classes. And so I really wanted the opportunity to be able to, take those philosophy classes and a literature class and an arts class. And so that was a really appealing opportunity for me. The other was the kind of the sense of community, and kind of the collaborative spirit that the university has. If you've looked around at some other, high regarded engineering institutions, there's sometimes a little bit of, they give off kind of a cutthroat or super competitive vibe, which is really not my vibe at all. And so that's why I've really enjoyed Notre Dame engineering in particular, because it's super collaborative. I never feel like I'm competing for grades or internships or anything like that. And all of my friends, some of my best friends are in engineering, and it's a really great support network.
Yeah, absolutely. The community is, I think, number one at Notre Dame, not just, in engineering, where you meet a bunch of friends and your lifelong friends that might come from engineering, and even the first year engineering course that I still talk to those group partners that I have. But then also, in the residential life process here at Notre Dame, and just all the different student groups, there's just so many opportunities to get involved and to make an impact that I'm sure many of you already have at your high school. So to continue that kind of at a university that's focused around that was the big draw for me. And then I'll also add to that, it was mentioned earlier, the alumni support system. But that, I think, is a huge draw, not only while you're at Notre Dame, but past graduation, reaching out to alumni. You'll wear an alumni jacket or hat around, and people will actually just come up to you and ask, what dorm were you in, that sort of thing. And I always thought that was kind of, cheesy and a joke when I was a prospective student, but it's real. I've had it happen a couple of times. And then using that, to leverage internships and stuff is certainly available, but just having that community that, people to count on is really nice.
Yeah, great answers there. There's a question about what's the most memorable elective that you have taken? So Claire, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I'll give two electives. I'll say one non-engineering elective and then one engineering elective. So the non-engineering elective that I'm actually in right now is an Irish dance class. It's like a traditional Irish dance class, which has been a ton of fun. And so that's probably been my most memorable non-engineering elective. And then my most memorable engineering elective was I took a class called the Chemistry of Fermentation and Distillation. So we basically learned the chemistry of brewing beer, making wine, distilling spirits, which was super interesting. We made our own beer and wine, which was fun, and also got to learn more about kind of the chemistry and industrial processes behind, some of those favorite beverages.
Yeah, I would say within engineering, actually, it's not even a civil course, but I saw kind of a info session for this embedded systems course within electrical engineering, and decided to jump at it for whatever reason. But it was actually a really cool experience, especially to kind of get outside of my major and see some of the technical aspects of other disciplines. And learn a little bit, but also just kind of have an idea of, when I'm talking to those electrical engineers, now I kind of understand, and also, just get to have a little bit of the fun that class offered. Outside of engineering, I also saw a random email one afternoon about a class that was like on a Tuesday afternoon from like 5 to 7 each week, called Scientific Entrepreneurship. And I was like, well, it sounds interesting. I'll go. And so it actually turned out to be really neat. A associate professor, I suppose, from Chicago drove in each week and was just talking about how to build a business. And it was really just almost like a lecture series that you could sit in and listen to. But that didn't count for anything in my curriculum. Was just an extra 2 credits that I ended up taking. But it was a really cool experience and, a great, chance for me to kind of see a business side of things rather than just all engineering.
So Ken, that segues great into, there's a question about the Idea Center and other entrepreneurship opportunities. So maybe Claire, you can say a few words about having worked with the Idea Center and the entrepreneurship that goes on there.
Yeah, so the Idea Center kind of encompasses a lot of different entrepreneurial. So they support students, faculty, and then also community members. So as a student, if you have, some idea for a new company or new invention or something like that, you can bring that to the Idea Center, essentially give a pitch. And there are a lot of different competitions throughout the year where you can compete for money to essentially help start and run a new startup, which is super interesting. The work that I do with the Idea Center is with faculty. So I'm sure this is the reason I kind of wanted to get into engineering, but I was really interested in the applications of some of the more basic sciences, how that would impact the world, how that might affect people's lives. And so our goal is to, look at all of these papers that professors are publishing and try and see if they have any commercial potential, if we think they could, actually build a product, sell it, and create a startup out of that. So there are a lot of different opportunities to get involved with the Idea Center, and it's a kind of an interdisciplinary space. So there are engineers, people from the College of Business, people with design degrees, people from all across the college that are working there.
Good, thank you very much. There are a couple questions about minimum GPAs, required to stay in their major. There is no minimum GPA, although you have to have a 2.0 to be on campus. But there's no minimum requirement. You can go to any engineering major. There's no gates that only a certain number of students can go to one given department versus another. So we really want it to be driven by your interests for what you choose to do in the future. There's a question about professors and access for answering questions in office hours. And so I won't listen here for a second. How accessible are the professors? Can you start?
Accessible. Yeah, very accessible. We kind of touched on it a bit earlier, but office hours, both with teaching assistants and the professors themselves, every course sets up, multiple sessions a week. And so there's always that availability. And every class I've been in, the professor has started off the lecture with either giving us their phone number to reach out to if we need to, or just say, hey, email us and we'll work out a time if the scheduled office hours don't work.
Yeah, I've had really positive experiences with, getting in contact with professors and TAs. The one thing I will add is sometimes some of the older professors who haven't been in the classroom for a while, it can be challenging for, me being 22 to really understand or relate to what they're talking about sometimes. But the good thing is almost all engineering classes have TAs and they're all graduate students. And so those graduate students were in the classroom, 1 to 2 years ago and can really understand what you're going through at that moment. They probably have a degree in what you're trying to get your degree in. So even if, the professor isn't exactly giving you the help that you need, they're always super helpful TAs that are there to help as well.
All right, I'm really mindful of time. You guys have done an outstanding job. We have 1 minute left, so I'm going to ask each of you to give your advice to this group of students. We're hoping that we see them in an incoming class at Notre Dame, but what's your final piece of advice before we close out? Final words of wisdom. Ken, you want to start?
Yeah, I would just say, as Dr. Meyer said, we hope to see you all on campus next year. But really, follow whatever your dreams are. Follow the opportunities that you really want to chase down. As we mentioned, all the clubs and activities that you could get involved in here, they're offered, not only here, but other universities have great opportunities as well. So, kind of figure out, what you want to do, why you want to go into engineering, why you want to study what you want to, and then kind of chase that down. I think as long as you keep chasing, you can't go wrong.
Yeah, and I'll say, I know it felt like for me a really big decision, choosing where I'm going to go to college, choosing what my major is. But all of you who have gotten into Notre Dame are obviously very capable students, very driven. And no matter where you end up, we hope it's at Notre Dame in engineering. But no matter where you end up, you're going to be successful. And even if you, choose a major 2 years later, think, maybe this wasn't what I thought it was going to be, you're still lined up for success. So even though these seem like really big, intimidating decisions right now, you really can't go wrong. And no matter what you decide for your major.
Great. Thank you both so much. You did a really nice job. I didn't get to the research questions. There were a lot of really good questions in here that I'm sorry I didn't get to. You guys asked great questions. But research, a ton of our undergraduate students do research with faculty. You can do it for credit or for pay during the school year or over the summer. If you want to do research, there are opportunities available to you at Notre Dame. So I want to assure you of that. There were a couple of questions about computers and what laptop you should have. I'm mindful of time, so I want everyone to be able to sign off, but what I'm going to do is I just need to look up a link really quick. We have a link that mentions computing resources and what you should think about with that. So I'm going to add that to the chat. It's going to take me just a moment to locate it, but otherwise, I'm going to say good luck in your decision. We hope to see you in a future Notre Dame engineering class this fall. So thank you for your attention, and Ken and Claire, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all.
Thanks. And then I don't know if this is helpful, but I can pop my email in the chat as well.
That would be great.
Some more.
If either of you are willing to do that, that would be really helpful.
Absolutely.
All right, sorry, it took me just a moment to find this. I'm going to go ahead and add this to the chat. Here is the link that would talk more about computer options that you can select. Just to give you some guidance, we're open to what you want to pick. So if you want a Mac versus a PC, there's a pathway for you either way. We want you to be working with your preference, but I have a guide there listed. So thank you all again. Appreciate you being with us. We're gonna sign off here. We'll stop recording.